Well, when I was in high school, I had to study for the HSC. Oh, the HSC. That was the exam to end all exams. Our lives hung on the results of these exams. But how cruel to make us young people study. Exams should be for uni students, not us young people. And then when I got to uni, I had to study for my medicine exams. Oh, they were the exams to end all exams. Our lives hung on the result of these exams. But how cruel to make us uni students study. Exams should be for old people, not uni students. Oh, and then when I did my PhD, we had to do postgrad exams. Oh, they were the exams to end all exams. Our lives hung on the balance of these exams. But how cruel to make us old people study. Exams should be for young people, not old people with leaky brains. Exams, we all did them, we all survived them, but for what? What do we gain from all our study? What was the point of it all? Where was the joy? In other words, how do we find meaning in our search for knowledge? Well, welcome to our February series of talks where we are looking at meaning. And we're looking at these questions. How can I find meaning in the daily grind, in the search for knowledge, in the pursuit of pleasure, and the drudgery of work? And what we'll do this month is week by week, one by one, go through each one of these questions, and we'll see what the Bible, in particular a book called Ecclesiastes, has to say about our question. And this will come in the form of a 20-minute talk from me, followed by a time of question and answer. And today is week 2, question 2, and our question is this: how can I find meaning in our search for knowledge? And I'm going to define the search for knowledge as this: it's us on a quest to study, to learn, to understand more about ourselves, the world around us, and the people around us. And the Bible has this to say about our search for knowledge. I said to myself, and this is in the outline in front of you, look, in the first chunk, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learnt that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Wow, the Bible feels our pain. The Bible is groaning our groans with us. It's asking our same question in our search for knowledge. What is the point of it all? What do we gain? Where is the joy? In other words, how can I find meaning in our search for knowledge? Well, there are going to be 2 parts to today's talk, and the parts are there in the outline in front of you. And the first part, we'll look at, well, what are the problems in our search for knowledge? And in the second part, we'll look at, well, what we can do about our search for knowledge. So let's begin with the first part. What are the problems with our search for knowledge? And here I've got 2 things to say. Number 1, there's too much to know. Now, when I studied medicine, we had to study these big books, which we had to memorize for these big exams. And there really was too much to know. So I survived medicine based on a skill called short-term memory. Now, the key to short-term memory is you have to keep as short a time as possible between when you read the book and when you do the exam. And so 1 month before the exam, don't study. Hold your fire. The others have gone, but they've gone out too fast, too far, too soon. Be patient. Be calm. 1 week before the exam, don't study. It's still too soon. 1 night before the exam, that's when you study. You read, cram. Whatever's in the book in front of you, bam, 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 bam. You got to get into your head. And that night, don't sleep, because if you sleep, it's gone. And that morning, when you go to the exam, don't talk to anyone, because if you talk, it disappears. So just shut your eyes, close your ears, just turn up the exam, and when they say start writing, that is when you write. You write. You jettison whatever is up here, bang, you dump onto the page in front of you. And it doesn't have to make sense. That's the examiner's job. No need to do their job for them. That's what they're paid to do. I actually didn't do very well in medicine. I just scraped through with a pass. But in medicine, we had a saying, 51% was 1% wasted, because you only needed 50% to pass, so 1% extra was inefficiency. And we survived. We all survived that way because there really is too much to know. And we all did the same. We all studied very hard. But what have we got to show for our study? Like, how many of us can still solve 4x? How many of us can remember the dates of the Franco-Prussian War? How many of us can remember the nuances of the relationship between Hamlet and his friend Horatio? We've all forgotten. And it's amazing because we all worked very hard in our quest for knowledge. For many of us, our parents paid a lot of money for our education. And for many of us, our parents changed countries just so we got a better education. And yet when we say to them, hey, I can't remember the dates of the Franco-Prussian War, they're going, oh no, I've wasted all my money, my son's an idiot. No, they don't think that because they don't know the dates either. So we've all forgotten the things we tried to learn. There is too much to know. Now, one day a week I work as a doctor, and I work as a special form of doctor called a surgical assistant. And now you're saying, well, what is a surgical assistant? Well, if you were to go to a private hospital and get an operation, after the operation, you get 3 bills from the doctors. The first one is from the surgeon. You go, okay, the surgeon. Second one from the anaesthetist, okay, the anaesthetist. The third one, you go, who is this bozo sending me a third bill? Well, that is me, the surgical assistant. And so my most important job as a surgical assistant is just before the operation, before you go to sleep, I go, hi, my name is Sam. I'm the surgical assistant, and you'll be getting a bill from me in 3 weeks' time, as you drift off to sleep. Now, I work with doctors, and doctors, they all studied very hard. They all specialised. They took another 5 or 10 years of study, and they're usually in their 40s by the time they set up practice as a specialist. Now, doctors, as smart as they are, the whole point of specialising is to admit, there's too much to know, so I'm just going to pick a really small area, like the big toe, and I'm just going to learn everything about the big toe and ignore everything else. That's the whole point of specialisation. So I work with orthopaedic surgeons, bone doctors, and I work with a knee surgeon. So one day I saw him because I had a problem with my ankle. And he said, sorry, I don't do ankles. You're going to have to see someone else. And I think, you are kidding. They're both joints. They're right next to each other. How different can they be? And yet these guys are specialised in just one joint, 2 or 3 bones per joint, and that's it. Because there's way too much to know. And it's the same with most of us here in this room. Like, I can feel the learnedness, the knowledge, the smartness in this room, the cumulative wisdom that's just coming out, oozing out of the audience here. I mean, I can feel the university qualifications, the post-grad study, the research, the publications, the titles, the respect that you have in your fields of knowledge, in your areas of specialty. And yet, as smart as we are, as respected as we are, when we get home, and if the tap is dripping, we have to call a plumber because we don't know how to fix that. If the engine warning light comes on in our car, we have to see a mechanic. And if our computer crashes, we have to ring up our 10-year-old nephew. So as smart as we are, as much as we've studied, as much as we know, outside of our specialty, a 10-year-old knows more than what we know. Because that's the first problem in our search for knowledge. There's just too much to know. But there's a second problem in our search for knowledge, and it's this. What is wise today will be foolish tomorrow. This book is a famous book by Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Chicago University, came out in the 1960s. It's a seminal work. This book coined the phrase paradigm shift. So whenever we say paradigm shift, it actually came from Thomas Kuhn, Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And Thomas Kuhn argues convincingly that we actually don't get smarter, we don't know more and more, we don't accumulate knowledge. Instead, what happens is we change our paradigms. It's like, here's a bucket into which I pour my knowledge, and every now and then we change buckets. We change the model through which we understand our information. We change the lenses through which we view the data. So once upon a time we believed in ether, and now in science we don't. Then we believed in Newton's physics, and then we had a paradigm shift, and now we believe in Einstein's physics. But that just means we're just one step away from the next paradigm shift, and whatever we know now will not be what we know tomorrow. Whatever is wise now won't be what we think is wise tomorrow. It'd be foolish. For example, only 20 years ago, I graduated as a doctor, and I was taught that stomach ulcers are caused by acid. And if you saw me for stomach ulcer, I would have given you an antacid to get you the acid level in your stomach down. And in severe cases, you actually cut the nerve that produces acid in the stomach, and you cut out 1/3 of the stomach and remove it. And that's the operation that was done to my father. But then in the last 10 years, there's been a paradigm shift. And they've said now stomach ulcers are caused by, as you know, bacteria. And so now you treat stomach ulcers with an antibiotic and not an antacid. So whatever was once wise medicine, like cutting out a stomach for my dad, is now seen as foolish medicine. Whatever is wise today will be foolish tomorrow. Whatever we know now won't be what we know tomorrow. We have paradigm shifts. And the Bible says the same thing. Then I turn my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. And this is in that second chunk in our outline. And I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. So it should be better to be more wise and learned. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? And I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. In other words, what do we gain from our knowledge? Because there's too much to know. We end up knowing nothing about everything. What is wise today will be foolish tomorrow. So what is the difference between wisdom and folly? It's nothing. We gain nothing. And then in the end, both die anyway. And that's something we'll look at in future talks. So that's the problem. There's too much to know. What is wise today will be foolish tomorrow. So what can we do about this? So this brings me to the second half of the talk. And here I suggest two things. What can we do about this? Number one, it's okay not to know everything. Just chill. It's okay not to know everything. I have 3 boys, Toby, Cooper and Jonty, aged 8, 6 and 4. And one day they came to me and said, Dad, is it true that you know everything? And I said, yes, sons, it is true. I know everything. And they were so excited. So they then asked me, so Dad, how many types of spiders are there in Australia? And I went, I don't know. And they went, oh, Dad. They were so disappointed. And I remember when one of my sons was about 3 years old, he said, Dad, I can't wait until I'm 5. And I said, why is that? Because at 5, I would know everything. And so there's a childlike innocence there to think that we can know everything. But now that we're grown-ups, we know that we can't know everything. And this is something to be celebrated. It's not a problem. It's okay not to know everything. In the history of thought, there have been 2 camps when it comes to knowledge. We've had the skeptics who've said, you know what, we can't know anything. We can only have 0% knowledge. And then you have the opposite camp, the foundationalists, who say, you know, we can know everything with 100% certainty. So an example is a guy called René Descartes, 1600s, and he argued everything we know is like a pyramid. All we got to do is get the bottom layer, a bedrock foundation of 100% certain knowledge, and from that we can construct all knowledge, and we can have 100% knowledge with 100% certainty because we've got that bottom layer. But the problem is, people went to Descartes and said, well, what is this bottom layer? And suddenly realised we don't have a bottom layer that we know for sure. And so does that mean the skeptics are right? We can know nothing with 0% certainty? Well, let me suggest a third position. And the third position is this. We can have adequate knowledge with adequate certainty. And then you would say to me, but based on what? Well, I said, well, based on a bedrock layer of certainty. And you say, well, where is this bedrock layer? And I say, well, it doesn't matter that we don't have it, as long as we know someone else who has that bottom layer, and we know and trust this person, and this person can guide us. And everything we know is based on what this person knows. And then you would say to me, but who is this person that we can know and trust? Well, just a few months ago, I took my wife to see Star Wars on the big screen, and even though this is being recorded, I know no one is watching this recording, let me just say, she fell asleep 3 times in the movie, to my horror. But in her defense, when I watched Fast and Furious 7, I also fell asleep. So we're not very good at staying awake in movies. But when we watched the movie, it was surrounded by these Star Wars geeks. And the Star Wars geeks, they live in a world where the Millennium Falcon is real, Jedi Knights are real, and lightsabers are real. So what we think is fantasy, they think is real. But how do we know that their world is fantasy and not real? It's a bit smug, condescending and patronising of us to say that their world is fantasy and our world is real, when someone else could say the same thing about our knowledge. Like if paradigm shifts are happening all the time in science, we're just one paradigm shift away from our knowledge turning into fantasy. So how do we know what is real and what is fantasy? And who is this someone we can trust to tell us what is real and what are the 100% certain truths? Well, this brings me to the second point I want to say on what we can do. We need to know and worship the God behind the universe. This is what the third chunk of Bible says. It says this, of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the body. So that's the problem we've been talking about. But what's the solution? Here's the solution. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion, the solution. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. In other words, God knows everything. And if we base what we know on what God knows, we just know him, trust him, and worship him, then we'll know everything we need to know to have adequate knowledge with adequate certainty. I went to a private high school in Sydney where it was compulsory to be in the cadets unless you got into the orchestra. And like every Asian kid, I found a way to get into the orchestra. And my instrument was the triangle. And it wasn't easy playing the triangle because it was such an unimportant instrument. You didn't get to play it often. And so often you'd have these 100 bar rests before you got to play. So you'd be going 1, 2, 3, and it was finally, ding, you got to play your part. And so, no, I wasn't the violin, I wasn't the trumpet, I wasn't the cello, but I had my part to play, and my role was to play it well. Unlike the conductor, who is meant to know everything. The conductor has all the parts in front of them, and they conduct the people who play. Now, I wasn't the conductor. I shouldn't be so arrogant to think I can be the conductor, but on the other hand, it's quite freeing to know I don't have to be the conductor. Instead, my role is to play my part well that the conductor has given me and to be in time, in tune, in rhythm with the conductor. And life is the same. We can be so arrogant to think we need to know everything, but on the other hand, it's quite freeing to know we don't need to know everything. But if there's a loving, warm, personal God behind the universe, then this God gets to be the conductor. He knows everything, so I don't have to know everything. I know what he gives me to know. I play my part well, and the most important thing is to be in a functional, warm relationship. In other words, in time, in tune, in rhythm with this God? So do you remember our original question? It was this: how can I find meaning in the search for knowledge? Well, it all comes down to this question: is there a God behind this universe? Because if there is no God, if there is no conductor holding it together, then really our search for knowledge is a bit futile, a bit meaningless, because there's too much to know. What can I know? What is wisdom today will be just foolishness tomorrow. And what is real and what is fantasy? How do I know what is real? What is the point? What do I gain in the end? But if there is a conductor, God knows everything. He gives me what I need to know. I play my part well, and I make sure I'm in a loving, warm relationship with this God so that I'm in tune, in time, in rhythm with this God. Now, in medicine, there's a hierarchy of arrogance when it comes to specialties. So the GPs, they're pretty humble. They're down the bottom line but in terms of arrogance. But as you climb up the line, the specialists, they're a little bit more arrogant. And then the surgeons are more arrogant. And then you get your subspecialties of surgeons. And everyone wants to say the orthopedic surgeons, they're the most arrogant. But because I work in the field of orthopedics, let me just tell you, everyone knows the neurosurgeons, the brain doctors, they are the most arrogant. And so there's a joke that goes around in medicine. It goes like this. There's a nurse who had to work with neurosurgeons. And when she died, she got into heaven. And then she asked the angels in heaven, will there be any neurosurgeons here in heaven? And they assure her, no, there are no neurosurgeons in heaven. And she goes, phew, this really is heaven. So she walks around, she starts enjoying herself in heaven, enjoys the sights. And then she sees a neurosurgeon. There he is in his blue scrubs, briefcase, and brain drill. And so she grabs one of the angels and said, what's going on? You said there were no neurosurgeons in heaven. I just saw a neurosurgeon. And the angel says, it's okay. That's only God. Every now and then he likes to play dress up and pretend he's a neurosurgeon. And of course the joke is some of us are so arrogant that we would think God wishes he were us. But God doesn't wish he were us. And at the same time, we shouldn't wish we were God. But if we think we can know everything there is to know about this universe, that's us playing God. It all comes down to this. We have two choices. Choice number one, I can know everything about this universe. In fact, I am always right. I know everything. And I don't need to listen to anyone else. And you can see how naive, childish, smug, arrogant, condescending, patronising and self-righteous that choice would be. Or we have choice number two. There is a loving God behind this universe. And all I need to do is humble myself before this God, trust what he's given me to know and to know it well. But the most important thing is to know this God, to worship this God so that I can be in time, in tune and in rhythm with this God. So how can I find meaning in our search for knowledge? Humble ourselves before this God and trust him to know everything.
The amount of information dumped on us through media or the net, how do you decide what to pay attention to?
Wow. How do you decide what to pay attention to with the amount? Well, I think, so like I said, in the orchestra is overwhelming. And say, well, how about I just play my part and play it well? And it's a bit like that with God. He doesn't want us to know everything, to be experts in every field, but to be selective and just play our part well. But I think the question behind the question is, how can I be selective in what I need to know? So I guess it's all about prioritization. What are the things that really matter? And God has wired us all multi-dimensionally. So things that enhance relationships obviously matter. Things that enhance us being good at what we do in the place that God has put us obviously matter. But also God's programmed a bit of us, programs us to need leisure, rest and refreshment as well. So things that aid us in relaxing, chilling and being refreshed. So maybe those things, relationships, the roles we've been given, and a way to chill and relax and refresh. I might just add to the last one if I've got time. You know, I just listened to a TED radio hour. It was a recent episode, and it was on death, and they interviewed someone who is an emergency response person, and he's always treating people just before they die, like they've just had a car accident and he's seeing them as they're trapped, and they ask him, will I die? And he actually says, I've worked out the best hand, says, yes, you are about to die. And there's this sense now they're having the last conversation they will have before they die, and he's worked out in all his conversations, everyone's looking for 3 things in life. The first thing is they want forgiveness. So it's a moment of confession before they die. You know, I should have spent more time with my kids. I didn't respect my wife enough. I spent too much time at work. So there's a confession. Somehow they want absolution and forgiveness. The second thing they want is to be remembered. And the third thing they want is that they want meaning. Did what I do in life have any purpose? Did it make any difference? And so they're the 3 great priorities of life just before we die. So maybe we need to then work out, well, what do I need to know to enhance a way that I can find forgiveness and absolution, a way to be remembered, and also a way to make a difference in what I do in life.
All right. You know, it actually sounds like your series.
Okay, sorry.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't sound the meaning of life. It kind of sounds like what
Oh,
you're
yeah. So you need to come to the talks.
Yeah, you come to talk.
The meaning of life.
I'm just trying to, plug your talk. Anyway, next question. What do you do about Christians who act like they know everything? Is there something wrong there?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting. So in the Bible, God and Jesus, their worst opponents are the people who believe in God. Have you noticed that? So somehow there can be an arrogant smugness and self-righteousness that comes from, well, I know God, I know Jesus, I know everything. But hopefully you see I've argued, no, we can't know everything, and we shouldn't act like we know everything. And if we truly knew and worshipped God, it would actually humble us rather than make us smug, arrogant, or self-righteous.
Right, okay.
Are there more questions? I can push on.
Just push on a little bit there. I've got a couple other questions, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, right. Yeah, so somehow we think because I know God and God knows everything, I know everything. So that becomes a position called absolutism. And if you don't see things my way, you must be wrong. But what the Bible argues for us is God knows everything, but because we're finite and we're fallen, and often we have wrong motives, we need to be very humble in the way we approach God. So humility in what we can know is seen as a virtue in the Bible. And what's interesting in the Bible, and people who study ethics have gone this direction as well. We used to think to be wise or to be righteous was all about what you knew. It was all about principles and theory and knowledge. Now ethics is moving in the direction the Bible's always been, that it's always been about character. So there's a movement called virtue ethics. So it's all about what sort of character am I? And the Bible always sees self-righteousness and greed and pride to be awful virtues, whereas humility is one of the greatest virtues in the Bible. So again, if we truly knew God and worship God, we realize, okay, I need to be humble. And it's not about what I know so much as about who I am and how God is shaping me.
Okay.
So wisdom's more a virtue of character rather than what we do know.
All right, there you go. I'm glad you went on.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm actually gonna bring 2 questions together from 2 different people, but I think they kind of asked the same question. Knowing, first of all, how do we know which God to actually game that?
Yeah.
And then also, can we know that God is really there? And really certain about the knowledge that he or it has. Yeah.
How do I know which God is out there speaking to me? So what I'm sensing from these talks is in all of us is a God consciousness where we seek God, and no matter how much we try to suppress it, we cannot suppress it. In all of us is a universal human longing for God. We sense there's more to this world than what I can see and touch. There seems to be a God behind this that best explains why there's something instead of nothing, that best explains why we believe in truth, beauty and morality, and it best explains why there's a longing for more to this world than what I can see. So all of humanity, we all are on this universal quest to search for God, and we all do it in our own subjectivity and cultural locatedness, so they all has its different cultural flavorings. So the question now is, well, are we just blindly searching for this God? And the answer is yes, because we always create gods in our own image, how we want this God to be in our imaginations and fantasies, unless, and we would stay blind unless God actually speaks and says, this is who I am, this is my name. Because the whole nature of knowing God is we're after a relationship with this God. And people have pointed out relationships only work if both people speak. If the other person doesn't speak, you cannot know this person. But if the other person does speak and they give you their name, then you can know this person. And a big premise of the Christian claim to this God is that He didn't just make the universe, He doesn't just love us, He doesn't just save us, but He's a speaking God. He actually reveals Himself to us. And the greatest way He reveals to us is by sending Jesus, almost to say, this is my name. You call on the name of Jesus and you'll know God and you'll be saved. So we would be, yes, blindly searching for this God in our own blind, cultural located ways. But if God does speak, and yes, we still approach Him through our finiteness and subjectivity, but at least we now know His name and we can know Him personally.